I sometimes find when I talk to researchers that they are searching for information in ways that the librarians are not teaching them.
Exactly.
And the librarians are often teaching people to do searches in ways that the users don't do.
Exactly.
So I'm wondering to what you have to say to that.
Yes, well, we see that too. We hold we assess our services. We do a survey, and that's what we think. We help people, and they say, really? To a certain extent. So absolutely. So what we need to do is have this close connection and to understand the workflows of the researchers, and that's also why we have to be very close to our users. We have to understand them. So disciplinary backgrounds of the librarians who speak the language, etc. It becomes more and more important, because if we don't do that, we will not play a role. And that is an area where we can help people. Until it's clear, it's proven that we don't play a role. I do believe we have. We absolutely have.
It is an interesting question. If the librarians are meant to teach the users to search, and the researchers, have their own methods, to what extent is the librarian the authority about searching at that?
Oh yeah, I don't think we ever had an authority. Maybe back in the card catalog days, but we're certainly not the authority. But we can help categorize, and it's still the case that there's bibliographies and there's systems that people use, and our core competencies lie around information. The researcher's expertise is another expertise. So I'm sure there are things about information, knowledge, publications, data, whatever, that the researcher either, it's not his core competency, and it might also be things that, don't want to be bothered with. So I'm not sure if we will act as people who save the other person time and or add expertise. I think both, to be honest. But it will be different for each discipline, and it will also evolve with the with the way that research is done and the way that information is provided.
So you think in a lot of ways it's the infrastructure, metadata, stuff like that is more the contribution that we would make.
Yes. And we will not create metadata anymore. I mean, that used to be our core thing, and that's different.
What would we do?
We are the consultants.
In what sense?
We help, well, for example, we will help researchers to manage their data, their research data. I absolutely believe that. To help them think about how will you store it so that you can share it. How do you order things? We are all about ordering things, to have a systematic, because it's so interesting, because in the rise of the internet you see a renewed wish for categories and for labeling things. Oh yeah, we know about labeling things, and that's what I could. That's what I'm thinking of if I'm thinking of maybe the near future. Yeah. I'm not yet there where I say, well, we don't have to do all that.
So maybe we do. I see it as we have a role in the research process. We really do.
Yeah.
But we have to be a bit more painfully aware, in some sense, that what we think our users need often does not align with what they want and what they're asking us for. No. And so there's always that breakdown, and there's sort of that this tension or competing interests at heart. And so it would serve us well maybe to rethink our role in the research life cycle, and that it's maybe not our best use of resources and energy and time and money to help them search necessarily, but maybe helping. I don't know if you get questions from researchers at your institutions about making connections, this sort of scholarly communication landscape, and we get questions even at my very small college about I'd love to know who else is working on something that intersects with my research interests. I'd love for there to be a service when I'm searching for articles or when I'm searching for data. I would love for there to be something that's sort of pushing a connection to me where I could maybe make help develop my network in this area that I'm interested in that's maybe very specialized or very niche, right? So I wonder too what you think about librarians as having an increased role now as almost being advocates or emissaries in a way to our content providers, to people who are building the systems where researchers are going to collect this data or they're going to do their data management. Do we have an increased role now to be a voice for them when we meet with vendors, when we meet with publishers, when we meet with systems developers? Should we be asking for more, and how do we do that?
In the landscape where we deal with sort of the traditional partners, let's say publishers, mm-hmm. I think we have the intermediate role. We do. Because there's still this question of providing access and how does it happen and what are the conditions. Mm-hmm. So I think we do have that role. What I'm thinking of when you were talking is, let's say there's a researcher, and I've had this case that says, well, for my research, I need data from Facebook. How do I connect with the people from Facebook to get data that I want to use in my social sciences research? And I'm not sure if you were thinking about an example like that.
The sort of non-traditional content provider, right?
Yeah, exactly. So of course, we didn't have the immediate answer to that, but we could help with thinking about what to ask from Facebook and what to talk about or what to think about in terms of, okay, when you get the data, then what you do or what format or how will you be able to get it so that you can use it? What are the license conditions that you want to the reuse conditions that you are looking for? Are you aware of what you can then do with that data in terms of publishing them yourselves? Are you aware of the Creative Commons licenses? So there is an area where we can help make the connections. Maybe less of an intermediary role. That could well be. Can I come back to the collection for a minute? Of course. Because there's another thing that's happening. And we've seen that also, but in those libraries where you have historic collections, where you have special collections, older materials, I'm not sure what your experiences are, but it seems like those become more of the symbol of the collection.
Yes.
We have a very strong symbolic value, if you will. Everybody loves libraries, right? I always think that never change the name. And it is something, and you can say, well, it's symbolic and it's not private, but it's also something that people can and want to connect with. It is really meaningful. So in terms of collections, what I'm seeing is that in many libraries, what is happening and being invested in special collections grows. And maybe it's to replace a little bit, like we used to have this collection and you can count the books. Mm-hmm. Much of that we're saying, it's maybe not so important anymore to have that, or we can just share that. But this bit that is maybe special to a group of people because they can relate to the content or to the historic value or the place of origin or whatever. But that sort of replaces it maybe, and also is a continuation of the feel that people have for libraries and the connection that they want to make.
Interesting. Well, maybe we'll get back to, we can always come back, but we're going to get back to some of these questions that we had. So one of your interests, of course, that came out in the plenary presentation was preservation and perpetual access. So you express concern, actually, that the open access as a business model, maybe not so much as a movement, but as a business model, introduces new problems for this role in providing perpetual access and in preservation. Could you expand on that?
Well, maybe it's because I sort of didn't expect that. You know, you're moving to an open world, and that's completely aligned with our core mission, of course. And then at some point, it seems like on the one hand is open also closes another door. It opens a door and it closes a door on the back files. I'm not sure why. It's also because of business models. So then, what is more important? Almost like Anne said, and that's a horrible question. But I also remember that I was in negotiations a couple of years ago with a very large publisher, the larger publisher in the world. And we had a researcher at the table because we thought it would be useful to have a prominent researcher. And he said, "Oh, don't bother about, everything that's new we share among each other. What's really important is the archives." Of course, this was physics.
Yeah.
So, it's a discipline,
Right.
and they have already among themselves
Yeah.
a very active network of sharing. So he says, "Oh, why do we need a license anyway? No, I'm only interested in the archives. I want to be able to go back."
Yeah.
And so that is also what I remember, what startled me. I thought, oh, the rest you can do yourself. And now I'm thinking, oh, if open access to publication is on the agenda of people who do not have a long-term view, politicians, administrators maybe, then it should be our agenda to try and think, okay, what are we going to do? Because that is something that I'm not convinced that other parties will find as important as we think it's important. And I do expect from libraries, like Anne said, that this is a concern and we somehow need to address it. And as I said, we've been doing lots of things, and then when you really want to cancel a contract and you try to understand how can I offer my archives to my users, and you do the investigation and it turns out it's impossible, you really have a problem. And my feeling is that we've been, like I said, we've been ignoring it a little bit. Oh well, we'll probably always have a contract. Oh well. But it's so difficult.
Well, I
to
think
solve
it is an interesting question for a profession that has in the past always been, the status has been as intermediary between information producers, publishers and whatnot, and users, but it's also been one of preservation because it's the print things. But in a changed open environment, the question whether we have any particular reason to be involved in the preservation of those materials, well, we don't buy them and we don't house them. It's true also of the question of, like with APCs, people often say, well, the library has all the money for subscriptions, maybe we should also pay the APCs, but it doesn't make that much sense.
No, it doesn't.
So if the library is no longer preserving collections, nor is it an intermediary in an open environment, the question also with data, are we the best people to preserve data? Just because we preserved collections in the past? Do we have the technical skills? Do we have the know-how? So in my mind, one of the questions that comes, you got to really rethink pretty hard what your purpose is. And that's the question I would have for you at that level. Okay, you're going to be consultants. To what?
It has, if we have any added value in this new environment where we do not have the IT skills that IT people have to store, for example, big data and so on, we don't. We don't have that tradition. If we have any added value, it has to be around our core competencies that have been around for thousands of years. It has to come from our profession. And again, that is, it has to be tied to the metadata thing. We have the competency to look at how do you describe different versions of stuff, the whole methodology of thinking about that. That is where what we can use in a new environment, in a new way. It has a different, it will be a different service. It will look like something different. But it has to derive from that, from our core core competencies. I couldn't say it any differently.
So if we had these core competencies, are they the core competences we have now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so that is why many libraries say in research data management, we play a role. And you cannot leave it to IT, which only looks at, it's IT, it's storage, and it's metadata a little bit, and it's a little bit culture shift, and it's a little bit management, and it's a little bit, it's all of those things, and it's a little bit IT. And also, I'm sure that in many universities, it's true that the librarians have all the context. They're much closer to the researchers and to the community than other services in universities. So we also have the experience to work with researchers closely. Mm-hmm. And that is a competency that you want to use, next to what the IT does. But it's a mix. It's the people from the legal office. It's the people from IT. It's the people who develop the policy for education and research on an institutional level. And it's us. It's departments who look at how do researchers get funding. Because the funders now, of course, have requirements for et cetera. So it has to be a collaborative. It's like Jim Neal said so appropriately, you're sharing your limbs.
Oh, right.
With some of it is coming from another. Yeah, so it may be that as a library, we become much more invisible.
Yeah.
We used to be in a specific corner. Oh, they're doing their own thing. If we keep on being, organizations in a corner somewhere, will vanish. Nobody wants to invest that in the long term. So we need to blend in. And at the same time, I think if you look at an issue like preservation, we have to collaborate on a national, international scale among the professionals and say, we're not going to bother with long-term preservation other than we point to a party who's going to do it. That's also always very difficult, but try to sort of get resources together to work on that issue. In smaller countries like my country, we can point to a national library and say that is the core business of a national library, and we're going to look to that library for preservation and access. So stop thinking, I want to provide access as a single library, but really collaborate. So some things you want to do within the profession, and long-term preservation seems to me a topic that that could be further developed there. And then the other part will just blend in and will be just one of the parties. I'm not sure whether we will survive as a separate institution. It may be, but it may not be. And that's, of course, I think that's not our main goal. Right? Our main goal is make sure that what society needs or our users need is provided. And if we can add value, wonderful. If not,